Welcome in, latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. Go by SEC Mike on the Twitters. And there's our great friend, Stephen Lassan, the senior editor over at Athlon Sports. He's back to make his predictions for the upcoming weekend in the SEC. Stephen, how are you?
Mike, there are games this weekend? We've been all focused on all these coaching things. We forgot we got games this weekend, my friend. Man, what a crazy week with all the coaching drama. We got some playoff rankings. We got actual games this weekend. And Mike, I will always tell you, rule number one of being a college football fan, do not let anybody tell you there is a bad weekend of college football, because there is always good college football to find when there is a Saturday of games on, and we will miss this come February or March, I bet.
Yeah, and it's always these weeks, isn't it, Stephen, where, you go in it and be like, I don't even know if I'm going to watch this weekend. And then we get some crazy upsets. We feel like we've got the playoff figured out, and all of a sudden it's like a hand grenade gets thrown into the mix. So I'm just saying, keep your eye out. We got rivalry weekend upcoming, teams looking ahead. You just never know with this sport, do you?
Oh, 100%. I mean, going back to last weekend, Texas A&M and South Carolina, right? It was supposed to be a sleepy noon game, and that was going to be the one-sided game of the weekend before we got to the two showdowns. And look what happened with how that game played out in the first half, and A&M coming back, which, Mike, as always, you just never know. On a Saturday in college football, anything can happen. I will say it every week, too. Do not assume that the easiest or most likely path will happen. If it does happen, it's probably going to be one of those rare years. We always get some upsets, and who knows? The last couple of weeks here are probably due for some upsets, some unexpected things along the way.
Yeah, no doubt. And let me ask you this, Stephen. So I did not prepare you for this, but I literally just thought of this. And you're the smartest guy I know when it comes to all this stuff. So I don't know that there's a better person to ask, and I don't know that there's a good answer. So I'm putting you in a tough spot here, but we've already started to see it last year when Bo Pribula left Penn State in the middle of a playoff run. And I didn't call the guy out because I understood it. Thank goodness, Penn State didn't need him. It worked out, right? So, but point being, that kind of, because of the portal and everything, that decision had to get sped up. And now here we are a year forward, and we have not even ended the regular season, Stephen. We got James Franklin's already been hired at Virginia Tech. There's two schools that believe they already hired Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin's in the middle of a playoff chase, and apparently an ultimatum, even though a lot of people say, well, that's not the right word. But Ole Miss is wanting a decision, understandably. How do we fix this? Because the only way that I can contemplate it is to fix or adjust the college football calendar. And I don't know that that's physically possible, but have you given any thought to that?
Mike, I think the biggest obstacle is that academic calendar, because you have to get players enrolled by a certain point, and that impacts the transfer window. It impacts the signing date and periods and all that. I think that's always been the biggest obstacle. Like every time you see, everybody agrees that the calendar is screwed up and it's messed up and something needs to change. And everybody keeps coming back to, what do you do about the academic side of it? And that's really the biggest obstacle in all of this. I do think the portal moving to January may help some of the player movement slow, although I do think you're going to get some players start to declare when seasons end, even though the portal isn't open at that point. So, Mike, I hate to tell you, I don't know there is a slam dunk answer right now, because and two things can be true. I think I don't want college football to be like the NFL, but I do want college football to have the NFL set up where it's like coaching stuff comes after the season. You got your free agency period. We can kind of settle on the games and keep our focus on the field instead of all the drama that's going around here. So I don't know there is a good answer, just trying to fix the tight windows of the academic calendar and the college football needs of this. I will say, Mike, I've used this example before, and when it comes to scheduling, we need to get the SEC coaches in Bristol with Feinbaum to sit down. You remember when LeBron James was deciding between the Cavs and the Heat, and they had the decision? Like, get Kiffin an Ole Miss hat, an LSU hat, and a Florida hat. Get Feinbaum in the room, and the decision. Think about the ratings the SEC network could drive for that.
Is there any possibility that they could just, and I'm seeing it in the comments already, Stephen. I think we got a couple Cardell Jones in the comments. I didn't come here to play school, which I get it. Hey, these guys are making a ton of money and all this. Could we get in a reality where we just say, all right, well, the football players don't have to go to school for the first 6 months of the year? I mean, again, would that be the best look? I'm sure not, but could that be a solution to all this?
That has been tossed around. I think there's been some, at some point your athletics split off, like basically from the school. I know it's sort of like a fringe idea that I've seen mentioned in various circles every now and then. So, I mean, I guess, Mike, I do think at some point, and, that's just kind of big picture thinking here in college football, a lot has changed in the last 3 years. A ton has changed in the last 10. And my guess is a lot is going to change in the next 5. And I mean, you start thinking like when the TV contracts expire, the playoff expansion this time or in the future, what do conferences look like? What are players? Are they having some kind of bargaining agreement with the schools? So I guess to answer your question, Mike, is I would expect that in the future there probably are some changes, and maybe it does revolve around that. Maybe it revolves around a little bit more collective bargaining with schools and players to have a little bit more rigid rules on some of this stuff. So I expect it to change. The question is like, what are the mechanisms that it changes, and how does that future in college football look like?
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I'm sure people are tired of hypotheticals and how we can fix college football, even though we have literally no power to do it.
We could run for commissioner, don't you think?
Yeah.
We do a better job than these other guys. We actually like college football. So
sadly, we may be more qualified than the people that actually run the sport, Stephen, which is not saying much for them. But I did want to get your thoughts on something that actually, well, I don't know how much this really matters either, Stephen, but the updated college football playoff rankings, and I say it doesn't matter, but just because, this is all subject to change, and where it is today doesn't really mean, it's going to be there in a week or 2 weeks or what have you. But for anybody that missed it, Stephen's got his eye on all these teams, so he's better than Cousin Shane and I at breaking this down. But the updated college football playoff rankings, we got Ohio State 1, Indiana 2. Get out of here. Texas A&M and Georgia 3 and 4. We got Texas Tech 5, Ole Miss 6, 7, Oregon 8, Oklahoma 9, Notre Dame 10, Alabama and Miami 11, and Tulane 12. What was your thoughts on the updated playoff rankings that were revealed last night, Stephen?
Speaking of people that we are more qualified than, the college football committee, I could say for certain, Mike, I will say that there's a lot that I don't know, but I feel confident saying that we could probably do a better job than some of these guys on the committee are doing. And I know it's a hard job, and there's a lot of subjectivity in this. But I think the first thing that jumped out to me was Alabama dropping 6 spots and Texas dropping 7 spots. They played, top 10 opponents, and they drop, especially Alabama, 6 spots after just losing basically on the last drive of the game. If nothing else, Alabama should have been ahead of Notre Dame. And I think the committee is really valuing and also taking into account bad losses and maybe penalizing Alabama for that loss to Florida State. And certainly it is a bad loss, but also when you look at the wins that Alabama has racked up, including number 4 Georgia, kind of feels like that should count for something. So I think the fact that Alabama and Texas dropped that much was very surprising to me. I think right at the top, if you're Texas A&M, Georgia, Ole Miss, you are sitting in great shape, almost in lock territory. If you're Oklahoma, you clearly have some work to do, but 2 wins, you're in. I think the Sooners are in pretty good shape if they win out. The other thing I would point you to, Mike, is I would look at a couple teams here. Oregon at 7, Miami at 13, and USC at 15. Oregon and USC play this weekend. If, and it's a big if because they're almost a 10-point underdog, if USC beats Oregon how does that change the potential at-large scenario here? Because Oregon has not been I think, favored by the committee. They're kind of maybe weak on the resume, but they are 7. I would assume that if USC beats Oregon, they're probably jumping in, which knocks Oregon out. But that also might impact Vanderbilt later on, because if Vanderbilt wins out, they'll be 10-2. So I wonder about those teams. Like, keep an eye on what happens in that Oregon USC game, because if Oregon takes care of business, that's one team that's knocked out of the way for Vanderbilt. Miami also got to play Virginia Tech, and then they go to Pittsburgh. A warm weather team going to Pitt has never worked out well in November. So that is an obstacle. Like, when you're thinking about, okay, what's the scenario that Vanderbilt could get in there? I think you need Miami to lose. I think you need a little help in the Big 12 with BYU and Utah. But those are the teams that I'm watching this week and next week as far as clearing a path for Vanderbilt to sneak into that last at-large spot. But also, shame on the committee for the job of dropping Alabama 6 spots for really reasons I don't understand.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, and then speaking of a potential bad loss here, Stephen, and man, I hope after this circus these fans and these players have been put through, it doesn't happen. But I think it's fair to now question, Stephen. This should not happen. Let me be clear. I do not support this. But given what we just saw, Alabama, the massive drop they had for losing to a team that is in the playoff field, they had this massive drop. What happens, Stephen, if, God forbid, Ole Miss loses the Egg Bowl on the road to a Mississippi State team that currently has a losing record? Now, they wouldn't finish with a losing record. They'd be 6-6. So maybe not quite as horrible as it could be, but is there a chance that if Ole Miss, which all these distractions on the road, rivalry, if they lose, I'm not asking you should they get kicked out of the playoff. I'm asking you if you think the committee may rank them to where they fall out.
I will tell you, my panic meter right now is not very high for that, because I do wonder if you're looking at just kind of like where the floor could be. 10-2 Oklahoma, 10-2 Ole Miss. I mean, Ole Miss has the head-to-head, and I think in that scenario that should probably count. I wouldn't drop Ole Miss very far, but you're right. Seeing what the committee did by dropping Alabama 6 spots and Texas by 7 to losing to top 5 and 10 teams definitely has my antenna up a little bit here. And as far as not only if Ole Miss loses, what happens if they lose their coach? Because we do see some precedent with this, because Florida State, when they lost Jordan Travis, they were out of the playoff. You didn't ask me should. I think that'd be a really bad precedent to say they earned it on the field. It's 12 teams. We're not talking about like these 2 teams are equal. If you get into a scenario where somebody is 8th, 9th in your rankings and you're talking about keeping them out because they may lose a head coach and maybe they lost to Mississippi State, I think that's really bad precedent. But I guess what I would say to that is, Mike, if I'm an Ole Miss fan, I'm not sleeping great just yet. I think take care of business against Mississippi State and all these questions go away. But there is a little bit of doubt because this is kind of uncharted territory.
Mm-hmm. And then Cousin Shane's got a question for you. Is Tennessee, is there a path for them to get back?
Well, I think, Mike, first of all, take care of business the next 2 weeks. Vanderbilt is 14th. If Tennessee wins out and you beat Vanderbilt, you're going to be right back in the top 15. So that's step one. I think step 2 is just absolute chaos and like destruction in the rankings, because you probably need BYU to lose to Cincinnati this week. You probably need Utah at that point. Should say the Big 12 tiebreakers, you could get 4 or 5 teams like tied, fighting, depending on how this all shakes out. So you probably need Utah to lose. You need BYU. I would also be the biggest Pitt Panthers fan in the world and root for them to beat Miami in a few weeks. So, Mike, that's a lot. But I would say win out and hope for chaos. That's probably the easiest path there for Cousin Shade.
Okay. Well, the question had to be asked, Stephen. Much like the question has to be asked of who you got this week. Oh, the PrizePicks back again. They've been partnered with us for 5 years. So, Stephen, we're about to get to his predictions for the upcoming weekend. But before we get into his game predictions, we like to head on over to PrizePicks. promo code SEC. You play 5, you get 50 over at PrizePicks. This is daily fantasy. So the reason we really love PrizePicks because they have the college football options. They got all the sports, NFL, NBA, all the sports. They got you covered over at PrizePicks. But again, we love it for specifically the SEC player projections. But so all you got to do is select more than or less than on the player projections. So Stephen, I'd love to hear your PrizePick selections this week.
Mike, I've got 3 quarterbacks that I love the more than side on. And I'll start with the tandem first of all. How about Joey Aguilar, 249.5? And let's also just tandem that with DJ Lagway, 228.5. I know Florida's been up and down. Here's my theory, Mike. I think we're going to see some points. I think we're going to see some chaos. I think we're going to see a very entertaining game in the Swamp on Saturday night. We know Florida's secondary has given up some big plays. Of course, we know Tennessee's defense has struggled, like the way maybe Lagway got back on track a little bit last week. So I'm taking Aguilar and Lagway on the more than side this week.
I like that for Aguilar. For Lagway, again, I've laid it out here, Stephen. If there's a Florida quarterback that's going to go off this weekend, it's probably not even DJ. It's probably the backup, Tramel Jones, or even I've seen in the comments they're saying Harrison Bailey. This will be his revenge game. It'll be some off-the-wall quarterback that nobody anticipates doing anything, and he just has the game of his life. That's the way it goes. But, I kid. DJ Lagway, if good DJ shows up, absolutely. But the problem is we've seen far too many bad DJ Lagway, so that one would be a stay away from me. But I do like Joey Aguilar. And when I sent over the PrizePicks options to you, Stephen, I don't know if you caught this or not, but I did throw Nico on there. I was just kind of curious if you were going to select him.
I saw that and I was like, wait a minute. I had to start checking the SECs. Like, wait a minute, did somebody come back this week? So yeah, that was a nice little like early Christmas present to see that name pop up again.
So who else you got on the PrizePicks?
You know where I'm going with this one. We're going with Arch Manning, 268.5. And Mike, you may think I'm crazy, but let's just break this down. We know Arkansas is really iffy, questionable, struggling on defense. This is a good get-right game for the Texas offense. Get right before the A&M matchup. I know Texas didn't put up massive numbers on offense last week against Georgia. Obviously, that was Georgia. But before that, it really felt like Arch in this passing game was kind of finding its rhythm. Back-to-back 300-yard efforts, Mississippi State and Vanderbilt. So I do think, 300 is pretty reasonable here for Arch Manning against the Arkansas defense.
Okay. Well, I knew you were going to, that's why I just basically send these over as the Arch projections, and I always know which way Steven's going to lean. But yeah, no, I give you that. I think Arch is playing, but here's the catch there, Steven. If you actually watched the Georgia game, and I know you did, but I don't know how many people out there, they just look at the numbers. He had a pretty good game, I think, against Georgia. What the problem was, a lot of drops. Now, maybe he's just throws the perfect football that is just like uncatchable. They're like marveling at the spiral. I don't know. But, you're taking a little bit of a risk that his receivers actually come down with it. But, yeah, I guess Arkansas defense, I like that selection. I really do.
I think I looked it up yesterday, and Arch Manning has 19 drops by his receivers this year. I need to compare that to some of the other quarterbacks in the SEC, but I would imagine that's probably near the top of the list this season. So I just think this Arkansas defense struggles. It's a good get-right game for Arch Manning. And like you mentioned, catch the ball, get him the 300 yards to go on the more than side of PrizePicks. Actually, I'll go ahead and tell you, I'm going to tandem that with DeAndre Moore at 44.5. Ryan Wingo's at 68.5 on PrizePicks, but I kind of like the DeAndre Moore, 44.5. My thinking is all you need is really one big play against the secondary, which seems doable, and that checks off the box to hit the more than side.
Right. And again, Texas struggles so mightily to run the football. Now they should be able to run it on Arkansas. If you can't, we're already panicked, but we'll take that to a new height if we can't. But, yeah, I think Texas is going to be able to basically do whatever they want And now you got Sarkisian out here back against the wall, so to speak. He better put together quite the game plan. Otherwise, man, the heat is going to be to a new degree down there in Austin.
I mean, at least he came out and like said that he's going to be the head coach next year, and was kind of, I'd say belligerent about it, but he was at least honest and forceful. So I don't know. I mean, Mike, we talked about it on the panic meter on Monday. I think it's been clearly a disappointing season for Texas. I'm not necessarily panicked about where they're going, but I do think there are some things this offseason from, whether it's player evaluation, portal, roster, like there's some soul searching needs to be done here, because Georgia is the standard in the SEC. And if you come up short 3 times and you can't run the ball 3 times against Georgia, that's going to, how does Texas get over that hump in the future? Because if you want to win a national title, you're going to go through Ohio State or Georgia, and you got to figure out a way to beat them.
Right. All right. You got any other PrizePicks selections for us, Steven?
I got one for you. Let's go to the swamp. Let's go Jaden Baugh, 80.5, more than Mike. I told you I'm liking chaos. I'm liking some yards. I like points. So give me Jaden Baugh, 80.5 for the Gators on Saturday night. And also, Mike, in the receiving category, let's go Braylon Staley, 5.5 on receptions. I'm going to go more than. He's been around 5 in at least 5 straight games. I think we're going to, like I said, see some points. Think we're going to see a pretty entertaining game. And also, I'm going to go over to Nashville and take Eli Stowers, 62.5. I think got a good chance to get back-to-back 100-yard efforts. I think there's a chance he can get a third one on Saturday.
Ooh, yeah. I think, I like all those selections. I'm terrified of old Jaden Baugh heading into this Tennessee matchup, but yeah, I think it's safe to say he's still fighting hard for them Gators, and he'll be instrumental. I kind of questioned your DJ Lagway. I don't think I question anything about Jaden Baugh this year. He's been phenomenal. He's lived up to the hype. I know maybe some of his teammates haven't, but yeah, that's of those ones. That's probably my favorite one. Stowers I like a lot too. With the bye week, he got a little banged up, if memory serves, against Auburn, but he went full beast mode in that game. If he and Diego keep that chemistry going, which they've had for years, yeah, he's going to have a big game here.
Also, Jaden Baugh very quietly closing in on 1,000 yards. Just needs just under 200 in the next 2 games, which seems very doable given his Tennessee and Florida State. So I think Baugh and Lagway both have the potential to get to the more than side of this, Mike. But also, like you mentioned, Stowers, the bye week, I think for Vanderbilt's really going to help just across the board, whether it was defense, whether it was Pavia, Stowers. This team kind of ran out of steam last year due to some injuries. This year, this late bye week can really help, I think, as they try to make that push for the playoff.
Mm-hmm. All right, Steven, let's not delay any longer. Let's get into your predictions for the upcoming weekend in the SEC Cupcake Weekend, as we're calling it around here. I dare not say that against Shane. He's trying to eat better, and I just say the cupcake and he's off the rails. So I'm saving that. I saved that comment for you, Steven. Let's get into, we don't even have a point spread or anything. This should be a choose your score type game. We got a couple of these, unfortunately, but we got mighty Texas A&M at home against Samford. Who? Samford. I believe that's Jimbo Fisher's alma mater. Just for that case, we ought to really run it up on them. Noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, sleepy kick here. And this one is they won't even televise this damn game. SEC ESPN Plus. How bad is A&M going to win this one?
They don't want to televise it because it's going to be not safe for work. Because of Texas A&M is how good they are compared to Samford. Do you think Jimbo could do the coin toss maybe?
I don't know if it's true, but I did see a post. Again, I didn't even retweet it because who the heck knows? But the hot rumor is he was seen down in where was it? I think it was No. I think it was Fayetteville. I think he was at the gym in Fayetteville. Someone snapped a photo of him. So Jimbo, he could be back before we know it.
Jimbo to Arkansas?
Ooh.
I think Arkansas fans might not appreciate the Jimbo coming in there. Like, I think Samford to Texas A&M. Samford is 1-10. And like you said, Mike, it is a pick your score kind of game. A&M can use this week to get ready for Texas. The biggest thing here is just win the game. Don't get anybody hurt. Get the backup some work. Get rested up and ready for Texas. If you want to compare, Baylor beat Samford 42-7 earlier this season, and obviously A&M is better than Baylor. The tricky thing in predicting the scores is like how much is the starters going to play, and then also how much do they really want to accumulate a bunch of snaps? And a lot of these games, you see teams just try to, let's just run the clock out. Let's just get out of here with a win. So a hard time predicting the scores. There's one thing I do know is that if A&M loses this game, which there's no chance, right? There'll be massive problems in College Station, but they're not going to do that, Mike. Give me Texas A&M 59, Samford 3 on a sad field goal and a tribute to Jimbo Fisher.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to be a laugher. As is
kind of like Jimbo's tenure was too.
Hey, he's at the gym. He's trying to turn it around, right. Steven. Let's give him a little credit here. But as is Alabama against Eastern Illinois, 2:00 Eastern, 1 Central. This is another one, Steven. No point spread, no over-under. And again, not even televised on traditional broadcast. So good luck finding this one. How bad is Bama going to win this one?
Mike, Eastern Illinois, home to, I would say, 2 semi-successful quarterbacks in the NFL, Tony Romo and Jimmy Garoppolo. But they're not walking through the door this week in Tuscaloosa, right? And again, Alabama's going to take care of business. I would like to see Alabama come out angry, take care of business early, couple scoring drives with Ty Simpson, work on the run game, get ready for Auburn. Basically, just don't get anybody hurt. That Auburn game looms very large. If they win that game, think they're pretty safe for the playoff. If they lose, here we are again, 9-3, try to sweat out what happens on Selection Sunday. So maybe also a chance for Ty Simpson to pad the Heisman stats too. Thinking ahead with Auburn coming up and the SEC championship, I feel like the Heisman Trophy race is wide open. So it's a chance for Simpson to maybe kind of get back in it after the Oklahoma loss. Mike, Alabama's put up some points and numbers in Kalen DeBoer's tenure against some of these lower teams. I'm going to go 58-7. Alabama rolls easily over Eastern Illinois.
Any chance Alabama struggles to run the football against this opponent?
They shouldn't. If they do, that is a massive, massive concern going into the Auburn game. This kind of gets at what we were talking about just a minute ago too. In a game like this, you could see Alabama could just win this game 41-0 or something. But they could choose to say, we're going to spend this whole game working on basic run plays and trying to find the right mix, the right rhythm on the offensive line so that when you go to play Auburn, you're feeling better about everything offensively. So I don't think Ty Simpson needs to put up huge numbers here, but it is an opportunity. If they struggle to run the ball against an FCS opponent, I'd be very, very, very concerned going to that game next week.
Yeah, and for some reason, the committee chairman, Yurachek, mentioned Alabama's struggles to run the football as something that they're holding it against them, which that is not a metric they're supposed to use. So I don't know. I don't even know what to say about those damn jokers.
Also, Texas A&M's defense the week before. This is also probably, I apologize for getting on my soapbox here. It's probably a good reason why these things should just be emails because every week the committee vomits on themselves trying to explain these rankings, and it makes no sense. Trying to hear his explanation between Miami and Notre Dame and why the head-to-head, where they're not in the same region, but they will potentially if they keep winning. Sometimes all you have to say is this team is just better than this one. That's why we voted them. And to I appreciate them going into the weeds on the run game, but to say that they're, 10th in the rankings or 11th in the rankings because of the run game is a really strange way to frame that conversation.
Yeah. All right, Steven, how about the last cupcake we got of the weekend? Auburn versus Mercer. Oh, man, same time as Alabama. It's going to make it difficult to watch these two barn burners. 2:00 Eastern, 1 Central. Again, not even televised. You might have to watch this one on your cell phone. But thoughts on Auburn? Game 2 under DJ Durkin. And it sounds like the plan, they're going to keep Ashton Daniels on the sidelines and not burn his red shirt. What's your thoughts on this matchup?
I like that idea by DJ Durkin to redshirt Ashton Daniels here because he could be a part of your future next year. But also, Mike, I do think Deuce Knight having a opportunity on Saturday is good to see because, with the potential that he has, we haven't really seen him in extended action this year. This is a good opponent to do so. Now, I will tell you, if Hugh Freeze was the coach, I might be a little worried here because Mercer is one of the better FCS teams, and they can chuck it around. Braden Atkinson, their quarterback, leads the FCS in passing yards. So they can at least move it. Now, their defense, it's not been great at times at the FCS level. So I think Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton, I think they're going to have a good day on Saturday, whether it's Jackson Arnold, whether it's Deuce Knight. I think Auburn's offense will eventually get on track here. So I do think also worth keeping in mind if you're trying to watch this game, if you want to bet it, keep in mind Mercer has a chance to make the FCS playoffs. So how many guys do they play could always be a question as they worry about what's probably their bigger goal of the season. So I do think Mercer can move it, Mike. So I'm going to take Auburn 41-17. Pretty easy win. Maybe Mercer tacks on a couple late scores, and Auburn gets ready for that game next week against Alabama and what is a massive, massive showdown.
Yeah, no, I can't wait for that one. So I'm not wasting any more time on this one. How about Georgia, Stephen? Mighty Georgia. Huge favorite here. Against Charlotte. Charlotte's Web over here. Georgia favored, Stephen, by 44.5 total points. Man, I think it was 45 at one point. Money must be coming in on old Charlotte. Over under 55.5 total points, 12:45 Eastern, 11:45 Central on the SEC network. How bad's Georgia going to win this one?
Mike, I do think it is a question of what the final score and how bad it could be, just because, if you look at the games that Georgia played earlier this year, mighty Austin P wasn't one-sided at 28-6. They beat Marshall 45-7. If you want to compare, I think Charlotte is way worse than Marshall. So if you're a Georgia fan, that probably gives you an idea, just comparing those teams this season. I mean, Charlotte is averaging 16 points a game. They're giving up about 37. They're at the bottom of the country in offensive success rate and defensive success rate. And if you listen to the Monday show, they only have one win this year, and that was over an FCS team. I think they're 132 in my overall power rankings this week. So bottom line is, Mike, this is an easy win for Georgia. Just don't get anybody hurt. Get ready for next Saturday. Empty the bench kind of game for Kirby. Like I said, the only question is, is it one of those games where they spend the second half just running the ball over and over again, and there's only a couple possessions? But I'm going to take Georgia 52, Charlotte 3.
That's pretty bad. Taking your foot off the gas and still winning by nearly 50 points. You know what?
Yeah. Could be. Hey, good first half. Get Gunnar Stockton a little Heisman love, right?
All right. How about this one? Any trap game potential, Stephen, for South Carolina hosting Coastal Carolina? The Gamecocks favored by 23.5 points. The over-under is 52.5. 4:15 Eastern, 3:15 Central on the SEC network. Buddy, Beamer better win this one.
Absolutely, Mike. I mean, Coastal Carolina, they are going to be a bowl team this year, so a little bit more dangerous than Charlotte or some of these other teams that we've talked about. But they are going to, it sounds like, going to be down their starting quarterback. So Mari Collier was their starting quarterback last week. He got hurt. Now they've played a couple other guys, so they have some experience at quarterback for Coastal. They do give up about 6 yards a play on defense, allow nearly 200 rushing yards a game. So this could be a good opportunity for South Carolina to work on its rushing attack. They've also given up big plays. Kind of seems like a good day for Lenore Sellers and Nick Harbor to hook up on a few bombs on Saturday. So I think Coastal slightly more dangerous just because they are a team with the 6 wins. but the matchups really just don't favor them here. So I'd like to see South Carolina continue to build on that offensive success we saw last week. But early on, Mike Furry did a good job with kind of rhythm and play calling. And also with Clemson up next, be good to kind of build on last week. Good performance here. Go into the Clemson game with some momentum and finish out the year on a high note. So I like South Carolina 38, Coastal Carolina 13, and what's an easy win as and the Gamecocks get ready for Clemson coming in next week.
A top 4 win this year for Carolina.
Right. Man, if they had just picked off one to be going into the season finale against Clemson with bowl hopes, man, that would have been such a great setup. Dang. But
maybe
be coastal.
Next year.
Well, be coastal. Yeah.
They're going to be in the playoff next year.
Right. What'd you think of that?
I mean, honestly, I didn't mind him saying it because I think that's, you got to set, it's the opposite of old Sarkisian. Disappointment. Dude.
Who?
He put it out there. Hey, this has been a complete failure. We're going to be in the playoff next year. So I like it. But at the same time, it's questionable. It's slightly delusional.
Man, I guess my biggest question with South Carolina as we go into the offseason is still clearly the offensive coordinator spot, but also what happens with Sellers. And, does he go to the NFL? Does he go, come back, portal, whatever it is? I mean, it's a nice, I guess I like hearing a little bit of confidence out of the head coach and not, trying to downplay expectations. If nothing else, I just appreciate the fact that Beamer is like trying to raise the bar for next season. So not out of the question if Sellers comes back, they can be a top 25 team, but still some major concerns there.
Would you be in favor of them adding, say, Bobby Petrino as offensive coordinator?
Yes. Why not?
It's just a name to know, I think. I think he's a name for a lot of these coaches, and maybe even Texas.
I mean, I tried to drop the, Billy Napier played his college ball at Furman a couple weeks ago, and that would seem to bite on that.
Well, let's see if you're biting on this one, Steven. How about LSU coming off the 1-point win over Arkansas? Now they're back on the mat against Western Kentucky. LSU favored by 22.5. Over-unders 51.5. 7:45 Eastern, 6:45 Central, SEC Network. And Steven, I think the fans are, I don't really understand it, but they seemingly are happy, but I am not, because the latest news is Garrett Nussmeier, when they have the injury report tonight, he's going to be listed as doubtful. So it doesn't look like he's going to be playing in his final home appearance. I just think I think it's a shame, Stephen. Again, I know he hasn't had the year he wanted, and certainly LSU hasn't, but guy came back for this team, and I don't know. Maybe that's a different story for a different day, but I think it's unfortunate that if he doesn't get to play here.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, a guy that has had a lot of good moments for LSU, to not be able to suit up in his final home game at LSU. I mean, it's almost like, can you just get him into the game for like a handoff or something, just so he can get one final send off? And you're right. He hasn't had the greatest of seasons, but also I don't know how much of that is on him. How much do you devote to the injury? How much do you devote to the, questionable coordinator, schematic, offensive line too? So I don't think it's all on Nussmeier. Could he have played better this year? Absolutely. But I do think it is a shame, given somebody who stuck around like that in the portal era, where you see guys who stuck behind starters who are succeeding often transfer. He didn't, and kind of sucks that this is the way his career ended there.
Yeah. But do the Tigers go out a winner here, Stephen, in their final home game of the season?
I think they do, Mike. So Western Kentucky is a little dangerous. They are one of the better teams in Conference USA. I hate to sound like a broken record, but with Jacksonville State up next, that is the game that matters the most to Western Kentucky. Will they go all in on this matchup, or will they hold some guys back? We mentioned it on the Monday show, Mike. Old friend Tyson Helton coming back. But let's also welcome old friend Lavelle Wright. He was at Kentucky a few years ago. He had a stint at the great Austin Peay State University, and he is now the running back for Western Kentucky. So I just kind of like a little bit about this team. This is the first power conference opponent they've played this year. I do like their offense. I think they can score, good skill talent, 2 quarterbacks they can win with. Defensive stats are good. Conference USA is pretty weak. So I don't know how much you want to read into those numbers being actually pretty solid. So my question for LSU is, they overcame the sleepy start last week, rallied to beat Arkansas. I suspect that they will probably have a little bit more, I don't know what to say, like a little bit more energy for this one. So I think Western Kentucky will at least make it interesting, maybe in the first half. But I think with Western Kentucky 11th in Conference USA against the run, I think Caden Durham, Harlan Berry have a nice day. I think LSU pulls away in the second half. And sound the alarm. They will get to 30 points against an FBS opponent on Saturday, 34-13. I'll take LSU over Western Kentucky.
Hey, any win's a win this year in Baton Rouge. You know it?
Absolutely. Losing to Western Kentucky, even though I know it's kind of like a zombie LSU team, would not be a good thing. You don't want to have that on the resume this year.
All right, getting into the games that actually matter, Stephen, the conference matches. How about Arkansas traveling to Texas? Man, it's great to have this game back on an annual rotation here in the Southeastern Conference. We can renew this rivalry. Arkansas looking for this first conference win. Texas looking for any kind of momentum heading into the big A&M game. The Longhorns favored at home by 10.5 points. The over-under is 56.5 total. 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 Central. Nationally televised. What? On ABC. Thoughts on this one, Steven?
Mike, I don't know if you saw this, but Petrino kind of had some interesting comments this week about, as the losses and the season kind of finish here, it's tough to keep everybody motivated. And I thought that was interesting coming into Saturday's game, because also when you look at the spread, I think it was like 10 and it's dropped in favor of Arkansas. So I think just interesting kind of to see where these teams are that with nothing to play for, but also think that there's still a lot for Arkansas to play for. I mean, this is a rivalry game. Also, a lot of these, I'm sure, Texas players on the Arkansas roster playing at Texas. This is a huge opportunity for this team. I think if you're Texas, and I should say for Arkansas, I think they've been so close. Now you go to Texas. Like, if you want to get one SEC win, like winning at Texas is pretty nice if you're Arkansas. So I do think there's some motivation there. I think on the Texas side of things, like, number one, you get Texas A&M coming up. So good performance here, stack a good week as you go into the game against the Aggies, and also the playoff situation. I think they're out of it at this point, but you get some chaos at 9-3, you can maybe have a shot. It's a long shot, but still, that's kind of the stakes for Texas, is they need a good performance after last week. I think the matchup, Mike, it's pretty simple. It's like, can Arkansas get some stops defensively? And if you're Texas, your offense. I mean, this is a group that has underachieved this year. We know the questions on the offensive line, lack of a rushing attack. If that struggles on Saturday, that is a major, major concern going into next week's game. We talked about the PrizePicks. It really feels like an Arch Manning kind of game. We know Arkansas gives up a lot of yards, a lot of points, big plays. It's an opportunity for Texas to work out some of those things in the passing game. I do think if you're Arkansas, you kind of have to look at this as Texas on the stat sheet is struggling, but if you can hold them to field goals and not allow touchdowns, you got a shot here with Taylor Green on the other side. So anything of that kind of crazy, Mike?
No, not at all. And I really wanted to ask you, maybe not even necessarily for this game, but I do think it applies this week, but particularly next week. Level of concern that we saw Coach Pete, his defense, they were just all out of sorts against Georgia. Now, Mike Bobo, for all the criticism he got, those people should be worshiping that man, for years and years, trying to run his ass out of there, because he's dialing up. And maybe it's just more Bobo is on a heater here, but it just seemed like every critical play in that game last week. And obviously we need to credit the players, because the players are out there making the plays. And I've always said, and I still believe, the players matter more than the coaches. But Georgia just seemed to scheme up so many confused Longhorns, particularly in the secondary, that I have to imagine. I'm sure they're working on it, but I have to imagine Bobby Petrino, Colin Klein they're both looking at that tape saying, "Oh, we can do some of the similar things." How big of a concern is that going into this matchup that Bobby Petrino will be able to do some similar things to the Texas defense?
I think you have to be concerned because number one, if you spend your time chasing around Taylor Green and he makes a couple plays and you get a defense that gets a little tired on a drive, and then all of a sudden you got to mix up in the secondary, there's a big play. I also think Anthony Hill's supposed to be out on Saturday too, which is a big loss. I mean, the second level of that defense. So they've already had communication issues. Now you take away one of your best linebackers. Also, I mean, I was trying to frame this the right way, Mike, but I think they were a top 5 defense last year in success rate of Texas, and they are like closer to 50 this year. So there has been a performance drop off, and allowing 30 points in 3 straight games with some of the communication and injuries. I think if you're Texas, it'd be good to get a bounce back here against Arkansas, and if a good showing here. Arkansas is one of the best offenses in the SEC. I mean, this would be a strong way to head into that A&M game if you can do so.
And there's also a lot of questions, Stephen, fair or not, that Texas is a team that plays down to the level of the competition. And, the toughness, the physicality, that is a little bit of a concern as well, as exploited by Kirby Smart and even Billy Napier and company at Florida. So, Arkansas, where I know we get enamored with Taylor Green and Mike Washington, and I know Omega Blake's having a good year, but arguably their best positions are offensive and defensive line. So I'm not saying they're going to dominate Texas by any means, but if Texas plays down to the level of the competition once again, and they're unmotivated after a tough loss and hearing they may not make the college football playoff, I would not be stunned. I'll just say that if they drop this game.
I think it's just dangerous because Arkansas just keeps fighting. Like they just keep getting to the doorstep of winning some of these games. And if you keep knocking on the door and you keep having close games and close losses at some point, right? Like you're going to get one of these. And so the timing of this game is not great for Texas because you get the game against Georgia. Now you got to worry about Arkansas where everybody else is focused on Texas A&M. So the timing really doesn't work out in their favor. And Arkansas just being so close, bringing a quarterback of Taylor Green's caliber. But also, Mike, you mentioned it. This Arkansas offensive line probably underappreciated nationally for how they've played this year. So you add up a team that's got a good offensive line. They can match the physicality. They certainly did last year in Fayetteville. If Texas, this is a game in the fourth quarter, I would be very, very nervous if I was Texas because Arkansas could easily steal this one.
All right, Stephen, moment of truth. Who do you got winning? I don't even know if I have to ask that, given that your affinity for Arch Manning, but just go ahead and tell us anyway.
Mike, I think one stat that kind of worried me, Arkansas is -10 in turnover margin, Texas is +8. And I think the turnovers here, if Arkansas has that kind of performance where they're turning the ball over, that's obviously the upset hope's going to get pretty slim. But I think Arkansas is going to play well. I just think Texas, too much offense, and I think better defense. They get enough stops here. So I like Texas 34, Arkansas 24, a slight cover by the Longhorns. I think just not thinking too much about Texas A&M yet, and they get the job done on Saturday.
Okay. Like I said, I knew that was coming. Just like I do, the legend JP was going to give 5 memberships. Stephen, thank you, JP, for all you do for the show. He gifted Georgia Kudzu Mud Butt Beardo. That's a real name, Mud Butt Beardo. Welcome. Kyle Duplass, Brandon Thompson, and Shane Lucky. All of y'all, welcome to
the family.
Yeah, courtesy of the legend JP. And shout out Mudbutt.
One for every touchdown that Gunnar Stockton's going to throw on Saturday.
All right, Stephen, back to the action. I'm very fascinated to see who you got here in this, all of a sudden, very intriguing matchup, Stephen. We've got Kentucky on the road at Vanderbilt. And I get it, Vanderbilt. They're eyeing the playoff. They're a 10.5-point favorite in this matchup. The over-under's 52.5, 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 Central, nationally televised on ESPN. But there's a lot of optimism with old Big Blue, Stephen. And I don't know if you're aware of this. Shout out Nick Roush on the Roush Hour informed me that I believe it's not since 2015 has Vanderbilt won this game in Nashville. So Kentucky has dominated it. Of course, they didn't dominate it last year in Lexington. Yeah. But all that being said, Stephen, who do you like, Kentucky at Vanderbilt?
So, Mike, I think the stakes of this game are pretty clear. I think, number one, it's Kentucky's got a little bit of momentum here. 3-game winning streak, chance to go to a bowl game. You've got Vanderbilt, needs some help, but still very much alive to make the college football playoff. And I think considering that, I would like to see some style points out of Vanderbilt. Maybe it's not me. Maybe the committee wants to see some style points because that's probably the only way they're going to move up. So I think I was a little surprised at first to see the spread at 9.5 because it does feel like with the way Kentucky's playing, this game could be a lot closer. And I just think what's jumps at me right away is the two quarterbacks in this game. We talked about it earlier. Do think the off week probably very beneficial for Pavia in this offense to kind of reset, get healthy, get ready for these last two games. And the way that Cutter Boley has been playing for Kentucky, real bright spot. The sequencing of these games has been interesting with the Auburn game after Auburn kind of packed it in. You had Florida and Tennessee Tech, but there's a lot of really promising signs out of Cutter Boley, which brings me to the defenses, Mike. And, you look at Kentucky from a defensive standpoint, holding teams to under 4 yards a carry. And also they're fourth in the SEC in yards per play in conference only games. So maybe a little bit underrated. Maybe you could look at the offenses they played and also kind of take that into account. So I think that kind of brings me to some of the keys here, which is, does Pavia and Vanderbilt, do they kind of get back on track after the off week? And what does Kentucky's offense do, given that for the most part, they have struggled in SEC play outside of that game against Florida?
Yeah. I mean, again, and this is a highly contested series, 48-44 with 4 ties. Can't believe we used to have ties in here. But yeah, I mean, there's a case to be made for Kentucky, but is this legit, Stephen? That's kind of my biggest thing, because certainly Florida kind of tanked it in. I think that's fair to say. Auburn, that was literally the last game of the Hugh Freeze era. They were, I don't want to say they quit, but the offense quit basically the whole time Hugh Freeze was there. And then Tennessee Tech. So again, I don't know, Stephen. I don't know. I think Vanderbilt's the much better team, but their defense starting to come to pieces. So there's just so much intrigue for this matchup, and heck, the SEC Nation and all that, they're going to be here because they see it as well. This is a very interesting game, but I am confident in Vanderbilt because they've had that spotlight on them all season, and they really have handled it fairly well.
I do think we talked about the off week for Vanderbilt. They had an off week after playing Alabama, and then LSU, Missouri, Texas, and Auburn, like 4 pretty close physical battles, especially in the trenches, which is why I do think kind of a week to get away and reset and refresh on the season was probably a really good thing for this Vanderbilt team. But also when you look at Kentucky, I mean, they scored 38 against Florida, but this is also like word of caution. When you score 10 against Auburn, 13 against Texas, now granted, Texas and Georgia, they scored 14. Those are good defenses. And then there's the 34 mixed in there with Tennessee. And of course, Tennessee at the bottom of the SEC in defense. So I think you can kind of read into what you want there. It does feel like they're improving. How much of that improving? Like, what's the level of improvement, I think, remains to be seen. And maybe this game is a better tell for us to see how far Kentucky has progressed. Because I think if they play like they have the last couple of weeks, I think there's a good chance they can win maybe next week against Louisville and get to a bowl game.
Yeah, and I just think the problem for Kentucky, Stephen, a high-scoring matchup, I think that's your path to victory because of the struggles that Vanderbilt has had on defense. But if you're trying to win a shootout, I don't think enough people have caught on. Vanderbilt's one of the most efficient offenses in the country. Diego Pavia, arguably the most productive quarterback in the SEC this season. So you're going to have to outduel him. You're going to have to outduel this highly efficient offense. I'm just not. Would you agree with that? Is a path to a Kentucky win a high-scoring game or a low-scoring game?
Pavia has thrown for over 300 yards in back-to-back games. I think that kind of went a little bit under the radar. And you're right about the efficiency, Mike. They are a top 5 offense, and just in terms of success rate, the efficiency for this group has been ridiculously good. I think that raises a good question. I mean, if you're Kentucky, do you want a lower scoring game where Pavia is not creating a bunch of magic? Vanderbilt's won those games. They've won the lower scoring games, like against Missouri. I don't know, that's a tough call. I probably would say if I'm Kentucky, I might take my chances and try to just outscore them, like you said, like in a higher scoring game.
Right. So, basically you're putting in your faith in Cutter Boley to outperform him. And as good as he's looked, he's not looked very good on the road. South Carolina, Georgia. Now those are, and Auburn. But where he's looked the best is at home. So that also, in my mind, makes it a little bit tricky here going on the road. He'd have to shine for the first time in his college career. I'm not saying he can't, but it's the first time. I mean, that's a tall ask if you ask me.
I'm asking this question not to troll. I mean, it's like in all like seriousness. What do we expect the crowd to be like? Do we expect to have a lot of Kentucky there, or do we think Vanderbilt?
It's basketball season, so I think mostly Vanderbilt.
Yeah. I mean, Kentucky's brought quite a few fans to Nashville, and of course, they got a pretty big alumni base in Nashville too. So I'm not asking that question to troll. I just, from an atmosphere standpoint, you kind of wonder. But you're right. I mean, it is such a different beast going on the road in some of these environments in the SEC compared to the home cooking at your place. So I think that is kind of the next step. Just for Kentucky, like, does Boley play well here on the road? And we start to see that progression. Like, okay, he is the guy that they can for sure build around this offseason. You'd feel better about 2 back-to-back performances against Vanderbilt and Louisville. So to me, there's a lot at stake still for Kentucky, regardless of what happens in this game, because next week's game against Louisville could mean a lot. But there's Vanderbilt with the playoff, Kentucky bowl. Like, I know this game's not at the top of the list for national interest, Mike, but I still think there's a ton of intrigue here and a lot at stake for both teams.
Right, and I just checked. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean anything, but the Vanderbilt football, all these accounts, they like to bring to our attention when it's a sellout. They have not listed it, but at least on social media. Again, so I don't know if, take that with a grain of salt. But I feel like if it was a sellout, they would be sure to let us know. So may not even be a sellout. I mean, come on, we're number 14 in the country. We got to sell it out for if you're a Vanderbilt fan. What the heck are you doing? You know what?
Oh man, you got it. If you're a Vanderbilt fan, you got to get there, because there's a chance this team can make the playoff. I mean, it's potentially a 10-win Vanderbilt team. I mean, it's kind of like, not to quote Lane Kiffin, but like the good old days. Like, this is the good days right here for Vanderbilt football to be top 15 playoff chance, a quarterback that could be in the Heisman discussion. Man, I think it's a good spot for Vanderbilt.
Steven, no further delay. Are you keeping Vanderbilt in the playoff discussion, or are you keeping Kentucky to keep the heat going and lock up a bowl bid and win their 4th game in a row? What's your thoughts?
I know Mark Stoops is motivated, but I like the team coming off the bye week. I think we've seen, like, that's been a good, especially late in the season, a chance to reset. So I like Vanderbilt off the bye week. I like Vanderbilt at home, and I will not bet against Diego Pavia in this spot. So give me Vanderbilt 31, Kentucky 24.
Ooh, close one. Like a 4-quarter type ball game?
I think so. I think it's a close, maybe Vanderbilt leads, but it's just Kentucky's always within striking distance, and maybe a late score to kind of cover that 8-9 point spread.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know who's always scoring late? Steven.
Always showing up for them boys in Tuscaloosa. It's Steven Up. Roll Tide.
Thank you, Steven Up. He gifted Duke Silver Sooner. Duke, welcome to
The family.
And look at that, Stephen, a Bearer donating to a Sooner. Oh, there can be peace in this world after last week. You know what?
Was it? Did Stephen Up lose a bet to give it to us?
Well, it's random, but
Okay.
we do appreciate you,
Yeah.
Stephen Up. Thanks for being a good sport.
Yeah, he's always showing up, right?
Always. All right. Well, you know who's not always showing up, Stephen? That's old Tennessee in the swamp, damn it. Who do you like in this one? Tennessee on the road. 3.5 point favorite at Florida. My word, what could go wrong, Stephen? What could go wrong? Over under 57.5 total points. Night game, nationally televised. What were they thinking? I think people just like to live in Tennessee's agonizing defeat here. 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central, nationally televised on ABC. Again, a 3.5 point spread for a 7-3 team versus a 3-7. I think that tells you everything you need to know. Thoughts on this one?
But right, you know what what happens in this series. I've seen a lot of these games, and I know the point spread, and I know exactly what happens. So I am fascinated to see what happens on Saturday night, Mike, because there is nothing on the line really for either team. I mean, Tennessee, it's bowl positioning. If you're Florida, you're just trying to play spoiler. And Tennessee hasn't won in the swamp since 2003. But also, if you're Tennessee, there's the 9-3 definitely looks a lot better than 7-5. And if you lose this game and you lose to Vanderbilt, the offseason is not going to be a good place for Josh Heupel to start out with. So there's definitely something at stake here, Mike. But I just think about how the series has gone. I do not know which Florida team is going to show up on Saturday. And that is honestly, this is one of the hardest games to predict because Florida has been all over the map. I thought they packed it in against Kentucky, and then they nearly gave Ole Miss all they could handle last week. So you tell me which Florida team is going to show up, and I'll be able to better assess this game. But I do know one thing, and that is when we look at the matchups, the Tennessee offense against Florida's defense has my attention. Florida gives up big plays in the passing game. You'd like to see Tennessee get that ground game going. I know Mike, you and cousin Shane would. Florida was just gashed by Keywan Lacey, 13th in the SEC against the run. The big plays, like there's opportunities here for Joey Aguilar in this offense to get going. The downside is, can Florida pressure him? Can they create some turnovers like we saw in the Oklahoma game? So which side of that battle is going to win out? Is it Tennessee's firepower? And I think if I'm Josh Heupel, I want a fast start because I think the longer that Florida stays in this game, the worse it is for Tennessee. So get out to a fast start. Don't fumble the ball. Let Caleb Banks in his return maybe take it 90 yards for a touchdown. So fast start for Tennessee, and there's some matchups for the Vols here that favor them offensively.
Well, you asked the all-important question, Stephen, but to me it's not even a question. But to you it is, which Florida shows up? I already know the answer because I know this series. It doesn't matter who the coach is. God, I'm going to miss you, Billy. I'm going to miss you. Billy is the only Florida coach I know after starting with Steve Spurrier. I literally don't even know who coached before Spurrier, but all of them got a winning record over Tennessee except for old Billy. Again, we should have gave him one more year, Stephen. That was ridiculous. He deserved it. But good Florida's going to show up. This is the best they're going to look all damn season. I think they'll look better Saturday against Tennessee than they did against Texas, believe it or not. So, yeah, if I were to tell you that, what's your response?
My response would be Florida probably wins this game, Mike, because to your point, that is exactly why I love DJ Lagway and Jaden Ball on our PrizePicks selections this week. This Tennessee defense has been generous at giving out yards and points. Thought maybe Florida offensively had a little bit of good rhythm against Ole Miss and certainly some of the big plays in the passing game. But this is kind of the question for this game is Florida's offense, which has been inconsistent, going against the Tennessee defense that has had trouble getting stops. Which one of those sides is going to win out? And then if you're the Tennessee offense, there is going to be some opportunities for plays. Like they can't fumble it, can't interception. Like if you let Florida hang around here, that creates that late fourth quarter drama that we've seen so often at times in this series.
Well, I can just promise you, Steven, there's going to be drop passes, there's going to be fumbles, there's going to be special teams errors, there's going to be missed field goals, there's going to be bad punts. I mean, this is going to be, I think this is going to be a travesty of a football game to watch. I just know it. I know it.
Travesty. I was thinking chaos. I was thinking, like you said, I mean, this game might be, it's just going to be entertaining, right? There's like, there's certainly things on the line for Tennessee and Florida, but given the series and given where these two teams are and the quarterbacks and some of the firepower, it's like this one could just be a beautiful mess on Saturday night, and it is going to be glorious to watch.
Which quarterback do you have more confidence in to not throw an interception, Joey Aguilar or DJ Lagway?
That's a good question. Man, they're both going to throw one on Saturday night, right? Maybe more than one. I probably would. Man, I don't know. That's Lagway's got 13, Aguilar is 10. So I guess that's the tiebreaker. I'll go Aguilar slightly over Lagway. This is not a good stat, not a good stat that you would have to weigh.
Which running back or just which team? That's probably a better question. Do you have more confidence to rush for more yards, Florida or Tennessee?
I probably would say Jaden Baugh. Just take him because Tennessee's defensive front has struggled so much. But I think, going back to that Oklahoma game, I think one of the reasons that Tennessee was unable to get the job done or, move the ball at times was they couldn't run the ball. I think they'll have a lot easier time on Saturday night running the ball.
Mm-hmm. Which team do you have more confidence in to not implode? Maybe that's a good question too.
I think you have to go with Tennessee, don't you? Just
I
because.
don't.
Okay.
I know the history here.
Right. I think my thought on Tennessee was anytime, if you're Florida, you wonder where the tank is. Because you had that game against Kentucky. They bounced back against Ole Miss. I know they're at home. Tennessee, Florida State's a pretty fun way to end the season. There's implications for rivalries. I could see Florida having enough in the tank 2 more times. But also I could see, if Tennessee gets ahead, that might just be enough. Like a fast start and they're up 10-14-0. Lagway throws an interception. And this game is, Tennessee's in control.
That sounds nice, Stephen. It sounds nice, but I'd have to see it to actually believe it in the swamp where Tennessee hasn't won since the early 2000s. Does it happen Saturday night?
Mike, this is the game that I had the most difficult time predicting a winner because, to your point, I've seen this series. I know what happens. I also looked at the spread, looked at the stats, and everything here says to take Tennessee, right? They're the better. They are the better team. They get the better record. In the matchups, there's also a lot of them that favor Tennessee. You wonder about the tank. We talked about it too. Is it empty for Florida? Do they still have a little bit left at home? The rivalry series, yeah, I think they can get up for this one. I do not know what to expect out of Florida, and that's kind of why, knowing the series, not knowing what to expect out of Florida, I had to go Tennessee. 31-30.
31-30, yeah.
At the buzzer, Tennessee.
Well, just the fact that you picked Tennessee, again, that's what people do, Stephen, in these matchups. That gives me even less confidence that Tennessee is going to win. It's the only time Tennessee's got a chance in one of these Florida games is when no one picks them. So you just cursed the Vols. Thank you.
I have 2 paragraphs on my notes here, and this is like last minute decision here. So the other one just said, all the matchups favor Tennessee, but I know the series, take Florida, right? I don't know how it's going to happen. Nothing on paper says they probably should win this game. Florida somehow finds a way to do it. So I was really wrestling with this one, but I just had to, Mike, you might be right. Maybe I'm cursing you and Cousin Shane on Saturday night, but I am going to take Tennessee in a close one.
Well, I know who will enjoy Saturday night, Stephen, and that's the legend, JR.
The legend, Cousin JR, has done it again.
Thank you, JR, the big dog you are. I mean, it doesn't matter, Stephen. Florida lose, Tennessee lose. JR wins. You know what? So he's going to enjoy it. We appreciate you, buddy. He gifted Daniel Dooley. Daniel, welcome to
the family.
And Daniel, you better not be related to Derek. That's all I got to say.
I was going to say a Dooley came up during the Tennessee-Florida discussion, Mike.
I hate it. But I don't hate old Sooners Eagles. I hope I got that right. Sooners Eagles. Hey, gifted Steelhouse Barbecue. You're making me hungry. Steelhouse, welcome to
the family.
Thank you, Sooners Eagles. So that's natural transition to the big game this weekend, Stephen, in the Southeastern Conference. I think this is going to be the best game of the weekend, perhaps. Missouri at Oklahoma. Buddy, how's this not the night game?
Yeah.
Oklahoma favored by 9.5 points at home. Over-under's 42.5 points. Noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, nationally televised on ABC. Stephen, I believe the statistic, if I have this right, Missouri has not won in Norman in 59 seasons or 59 years. So however you want to say that. But, of course, they haven't played there that often here lately. But basically, point being, Oklahoma's owned this thing in general, but especially in Norman. Does Missouri get what I would consider, you let me know this too, Stephen, this would be the biggest win, perhaps, of the Eli Drinkwitz era if they could go to Oklahoma and beat a Sooner team that is currently projected to make the college football playoff?
I think so, Mike. I mean, I think for all those reasons that you mentioned, I mean, you're talking about knocking the team out of the college football playoff. I know some may quibble with the rivalry designation here, but it's the 98th meeting between these two teams. So I think just given where Oklahoma is, where Missouri is falling a little bit short of, getting to the playoff this year, I think it would be on the road, top 10 team. Yeah, I think it'd be a massive win for Eli Drinkwitz, biggest of his career.
And at the same time, we're starting to believe in Brent Venables, Stephen, as an maybe not elite, that's too far, but if he gets to the playoff, maybe he's in the conversation. But I question him all off season as whether he is worthy. We know what he is as a defensive coordinator, maybe the best in the entire country, but now he's emerging as a quality head coach in the Southeastern Conference, but he's got to finish the deal. Thoughts on just Oklahoma? Well, really, what'll be huge in this one, we'll have to see the injury report tonight, Stephen. Bo Pribula, Matt Zollers, who plays, but regardless, how does that affect Oklahoma's preparation, you think, specifically on the defensive side of the football, not being certain who's going to start for Missouri?
That's a good question. I think just given that Pribula is a much better runner than we've seen out of Zollers and Pribula, I think that is a pretty big difference. It seemed like Drinkwitz said that Zollers was going to start, so at least you kind of have an idea about preparing if you're Oklahoma. I think in general, whether it is Pribula or Zollers, like this to me, this seems like a clash of like stuff in the trenches, with that Oklahoma defensive line, that front, with or without R. Mason Thomas against Ahmad Hardy and that Missouri offensive line. So yes, there is some differences in how you'd have to prepare, but at the same time, though, it feels like the trenches are really whether this game is going to be won or lost. And also to your point on Venables, I think fair to say that he's built up some goodwill this year. Maybe big game Brent after beating Alabama last week, but just don't lose to Missouri or LSU and squander this chance, and all that goodwill that they've accumulated the last couple of weeks would go out the window.
Mm-hmm. And what does it tell you, if anything, about these two, that this is, I know it's not a great slate, but this is the best game, in my opinion, we got here in the Southeastern Conference. I know Oklahoma people, they have a high opinion of their football program, but they are about the only ones that did in terms of SEC programs. Most people all off season, we just heard, they're going to suck. They don't belong. Good luck life in the SEC. They're on path to make the playoff. Meanwhile, Missouri, I know they've fallen short. This is not where they want to be, but a top, I believe, 4 winningest program in the Southeastern Conference the last 3 seasons. What does it say about these two that they're kind of in this position?
I think it speaks to, I wouldn't say maybe program stability is kind of a bad word, but it also feels like you can see the upside of where these two programs could be. I think especially for Oklahoma, because it's always funny to me to see when Oklahoma joined the SEC, it was Oklahoma could be the Nebraska of the SEC. I mean, guys, come on. Oklahoma's track record, winning season after winning season, national championships. I mean, there's a couple programs in college football that are kind of like recession proof. Ohio State, I mean, Oklahoma was in that category. Like, yeah, life is tougher in the SEC. But when you have that track record, you have the fan base, you've got the resources, all it takes is the right coach to win national championships. So I think Oklahoma's kind of getting back to being, kind of that top 10, top 15 team. And I think for Missouri, they've been on the doorstep of the I guess, playoff conversation in the last couple of years, double digit win seasons. I believe if you keep getting to this range and you knock on the door at some point, if you're Missouri, you can get to 10-2, you will be in the playoffs. So I think what it showed is like both teams kind of like able to punch in their weight in the SEC, that they're not just going to be finishing 11, 12, 13th. There's a lot that these programs can do in the SEC.
Hey, shout out Chase Moore. Steven gave us a donation. This is the second year Missouri will be facing Oklahoma with the third string quarterback. The fact we even have a remote chance to be 2-0 is crazy. And then we got that Tennessee homer. Yeah, appreciate you for the $20 donation. Doesn't matter who's on the sideline. Florida always gets up for Tennessee. Beat the hell out of them Gators. Thank you, Tennessee homer. And Pop Goes to Culture says, I just got word. Kiffin has taken a job as the Olympic Jamaican bobsled team. Oh, cool runnings. Is this game as simple as, the running game? Is that overly simplistic? But, if Oklahoma shuts down, and I'm not saying they will, but if they shut down Missouri's run game, does Missouri have a shot in this one?
I think it's really tough to get there. Like in terms of a path, right? I think if you're Missouri, it's like, do you really want Zollers or Prabula to have to win 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8? Like I think everything flows off of that run game for Missouri. So I think, could they win? Like, could they win a crazy game like we saw Oklahoma and Alabama last week, where there's some short fields, some turnovers, some things like that? I think they could, but Mike, I think they got to win. They got to get Ahmad Hardy going. Like, it may not be 300 yards, but maybe it's enough to at least open some things up offensively. I mean, Oklahoma first in the SEC against the run. They're first nationally in success rate against the run. I mean, it's going to be tough sledding. But if they have success, then I think this game all of a sudden for Missouri gets a lot more winnable on Saturday.
And then how much do you think Missouri's defense, I think is the most underrated defense in this conference, is possibly at an advantage over Oklahoma's offense? Because again, we got to go a little bit deeper than just these wins, right? Oklahoma offense, not great against Alabama. That was more about defense being elite, special teams making plays. Oklahoma offense made plays. I'm not saying they were just didn't help at all, but they didn't win them that game necessarily. I would even say Tennessee, the offense, they made plays certainly in the second half, but Tennessee's defense is just complete garbage. Ole Miss, trying to think back to that game. I know there was a big run by Robinson, but again, same deal where the offense, I think, kind of held Oklahoma back there in the loss to Ole Miss. So the point being, Stephen, I think Missouri defense is better than Ole Miss, Tennessee, and even Alabama, whether people want to admit that or not. Could Missouri defense be the key to this game, forcing Mateer mistakes? Maybe they scored last week on defense, and could they be the catalyst for Missouri doing to Oklahoma what Oklahoma just did to Bama?
Yeah, I think the Missouri defense is probably very underrated nationally. And also I think this is what's fascinating about the matchup, is that you have such good on good with Oklahoma's defensive line in defense against Ahmad Hardy and Missouri's offensive front. But then you flip it over and you see, man, this Oklahoma offense, like they haven't really been the same since that Mateer injury. And in SEC games, they're under 5 yards of play. They're at the bottom of the offense in terms of a lot of offensive statistics. And you can just go, I mean, haven't really run the ball consistently. They've had some offensive line issues. Mateer's been banged up. Mateer maybe hasn't played up to the level we thought earlier in the season. So you just go down the list and you go, okay, if Missouri's front really starts to cause some havoc here and it's 3rd and long, and here comes Damon Wilson, here comes these other guys, yeah, Mateer can avoid them. But if I'm Missouri, I'm loving the idea of, hey, let's get these guys in 3rd and longs and make them execute. Because when you look at the offensive production against Alabama last week, I mean, they did enough. But if you don't have the breaks of turnovers and, special teams mistakes and things like that, you may have to put together some drives here. So I think that if I'm Missouri, I'd come into this game thinking our defense has got a really good chance to kind of hold serve, and they can get a couple mistakes, or maybe that's it. Maybe it's like a turnover by sacking Mateer, you force a fumble, gives your offense those short fields and a chance to make this a 4-quarter game.
All right, Steven. So who you got? You got Oklahoma staying in the playoff race, or do you got Missouri possibly getting the biggest win to date of the Eli Drakowitz era?
I think the first thing, Mike, is I think on paper, I think most people just expect Oklahoma to steamroll on Saturday. I know the spread is, but I think the consensus is there might be a little bit of overlooking this game. I think Missouri is going to be a tougher out than what most people expect. And I think it is also going to be a 4-quarter physical battle. I think trenches, rushing attack, points might be hard to come by. The over-under is at 41. So I'm actually going to take a little bit over on the total, but I do think putting together drives are going to be tough probably for both offenses. Both teams -2 in turnover margin. So I think a couple breaks we saw for Oklahoma played off big time last week. Can Missouri do the same thing on the road this Saturday? Mike, I can't pick against Oklahoma here. They've got everything to play for. They're on the doorstep of the playoff. They're at home. I think Oklahoma's defense against Zollers, freshman quarterback on the road, it's one thing to start at home against Mississippi State and certainly Texas A&M. It's another to go into Norman and try to ask a true freshman to win. It's tough. And I think Oklahoma's defensive line does enough to slow down Ahmad Hardy. Oklahoma 27, Missouri 20, as Oklahoma wins and moves one step closer to the college football playoff.
Hey, we had a question here. Appreciate you. Pop Goes the Culture. Serious question. How much does Oklahoma and Tulane help Ole Miss strength of schedule? Well, what the committee looks at, there's only a couple metrics they truly look at. They look at your strength of schedule, and they have their own metric. So it's not ESPN or Bill Connolly or, they have their own metric there. But two other things they look at, Stephen. They look at top 25 wins, and they go based on their own poll, so they can throw people in there and kind of skew it. Right now, Tulane and Oklahoma are obviously both in the top 25 of the playoff poll, so that really helps Ole Miss. And they also look at something called quality wins, which is wins over teams, essentially a win over a team with a winning record. So it helps in that metric as well. So, yeah, no doubt it helps. It certainly helps Ole Miss.
I think it does. So, we talked about earlier, like the chaos scenarios. If they were to lose to Mississippi State, they'd still be 10-2, and they have those wins. And so I think if I'm an Ole Miss fan, I'm like the biggest Tulane and Oklahoma fan in the world. Tulane plays at Temple this week. That could be kind of tricky, but Oklahoma beating Missouri would only strengthen that resume. And then again, I think why does that help? Well, let's just say, what if Ole Miss did lose that game? If you're talking about that head-to-head and those quality metrics, like Ole Miss probably shouldn't fall behind Oklahoma. Not saying head-to-head is everything. There's a lot that goes into it. But those wins, if they continue to look better, it only helps the Ole Miss strength of schedule. Mike, and I'm going to apologize to you because this also touches the soapbox thing here. I think on the subject of being a joke, it is absolute joke that the committee does not release the metrics. They should absolutely be made available to people like me and you so we can explain to fans, hey, this is why. We can do a lot better job than the committee chairman does of explaining what these things of why teams are ranked here and here and what they're looking at. Because, I mean, we're kind of flying blind on some of these metrics. Strength of schedule can be different from site to site. So it's a shame that they do not release those. Those should be public, and we should be able to have a better idea of how they're viewing some of these teams in rankings, strength of schedule, and all the metrics across the board.
But then they wouldn't have a TV show to promote it, Stephen.
Well, our discussion could replace it. It'd be better, right? Or
I 100% agree. But they want their free trips to Dallas or wherever the hell it is they go and eat probably good food and drink champagne and mock everybody. You know what,
Mike? They take their hats off when they go into the room.
Hey, shout out Junior. So I did see this while we were recording. Stephen, John Summerall reportedly interviewing with Florida. I don't read anything into that. Now, I mean, I'm not saying he's like not a candidate, but these schools interview. John Summerall's probably interviewed at Arkansas, Auburn, LSU, Florida. He's probably interviewed all of them, and these schools have probably interviewed 6 to 8 candidates.
Unless, well, yeah, I would agree with you. I guess the maybe the thing would be Florida doing its due diligence in case they need a backup option if Lane Kiffin does not go there. That would be
right.
I mean, I think it's perfectly logical to interview John Summerall. He's one of the top group of 5 coaches in the country. I think he'd be a fit at all these SEC openings, and it would be a great hire. So I think that is very smart for Florida. And
I don't think that it has any, I could be wrong, but I don't think that has any bearing on Lane Kiffin and whether he's told him no, or again, just like Steven said, they have to have other options in the event they know what Kiffin's doing.
Yeah, I totally agree, Mike. I hate to say this. I don't even know if Lane Kiffin knows what he's doing. I think that's probably of the options available, that is probably a very strong possibility. And you can read whatever you want to into his comments, his social media posts, that if you're a Florida, if you're LSU, if you're Ole Miss. So I think some of this is, and just think about the timing of what's going to happen, is we're going to get the games on Saturday. We're going to get to Monday, and it's going to be the lead up to the Egg Bowl because the game's on Friday. Then we're going to get into the situation of once Sunday gets here, that's when I think you're going to see this carousel really start to go 200 miles an hour, because there's a very short turnaround time to signing day, the championship games, and then bowl season and transfer. So if you want to get a coach in there to solidify that recruiting class, you got to move fast. And again, I think if you're just thinking about Florida and you're worried about the Kiffin thing, I think they're just doing their due diligence on as many candidates as possible to prepare for scenario 1, 2, and 3, because you don't want to get left. If Kiffin does decide to stay, you don't want to be sitting there going, we haven't interviewed anybody and we got to have a coach in 3 days. So just doing their due diligence, I would think.
And for all we know, Stephen, it's Summerall and his agent. I don't even know if he has an agent, but I assume he does. But his agent letting that information out there so that Auburn or Arkansas or whoever that wants John Summerall, maybe they up their ante to get this done quicker. You know what?
I definitely think there is some public, I was going to say public leakage. That's probably not a good way to put it, but that there's a reason some of these things get out, and they get out to put either pressure or leverage, or to say domino effect. Like, hey, if you want my client, you're going to have to up the ante because he's interviewing with Florida. So there's a reason these things are getting out, but just Kiffin holds all the cards, and once he makes his decision, I think the cards will start to fall into place rather fast.
And for all we know, it could be a message to Kiffin. Hey, we're prepared to hire John Summerall if you drag us out for another week. You know what?
Well, 100%. I mean, I think if you're LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida, he is by far your number one, but you have to have a backup plan. And you also got to have a decision at some point. And so this can't go on for 2 more weeks. And so you're trying to, you don't want to do something that makes your number one candidate angry at you, but you also need him to make a decision sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm. All right, Stephen, final thing here. You haven't given us your John Mateer lock of the week. Who are you putting that lock on?
Mike, I need a judge ruling here, and not talking about Joe Judge. I'm going to take a team that I predicted to lose, but I think they're going to cover. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, give me the Florida Gators as my John Batir 5-star lock of the week.
I figured that was coming, Steven, but hey, I can't fault you. I cannot fault you. All right, Steven, really appreciate you stopping by, dropping all this knowledge on us. Before you go, as always, will you remind the cousins how to follow you and how to find your work?
You can read all my work up at athlonsports.com. You can follow me over on Twitter at athlonsteven, Steven LCFB, over on Facebook and Instagram.
All right, Steven, I wish you a great evening, and I hope you enjoy the upcoming weekend of SEC action. Stay close to the computer, stay close to the phone. Lane Kiffin could make a decision at any point in time. I know you're probably lacking from sleep just because of that. But Shane and I will be back, cousins, here at 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 Central for the SEC mailbag. Anything else, Stephen, before we hop off the line?
Mike, I was going to give you a hard time for not showing the standings. Who's, probably a good thing because I don't want to,
Unfortunately, I don't have that loaded up, but I'll let you know you remain in the lead.
But I was going to say, this is it's either one of two things that are going to happen down the stretch. The cousins, you or Shane, you guys are going to get hot at the end and you guys are going to pass me, or I'm just going to fall apart. I'm not sure which one it is yet. But as always, enjoy it. Thanks to all the cousins for tuning in too.
And shout out JP for getting us the shout outs. Cousin JR, Steven Up, Sooner Eagles, Chase Moore, that Tennessee Homer, Pop Goes the Culture, and Junior. We appreciate each and every one of you. We'll catch you on the next one.
Hey, buddy, this beer's for you, Mike, and Cousin Shane. That SEC podcast loves the Pirate, and the Pirate loves that SEC podcast. Hail State.